welcome to the Human Design Rave Festival 2025.
Well, the moment has arrived. And hello,
Finally, right?
everyone, and welcome to Human Design Rave Festival 2025. And today I'm hosting Deborah Bergman herself. And we have a long history with Deborah, starting actually in the Rave Marathon, I think in 2020 or 2021 it was.
21. Yes.
Wow, long time ago.
Long
And
time. Seems like, yeah.
yeah, those of you who don't know, Deborah is behind a lot of books that are written and published. Yeah, with Jovian, Cosmology. She was given actually by Ra the direct knowledge of cosmology and dream rave, and really put a
And
lot
analyst training.
a
Yeah.
lot of work behind the trainings and structure. And these days, Deborah's activity is way beyond human design, really putting yourself in the art. All these things you're telling me, they're quite fascinating. But why don't you continue yourself? Would you like to
No,
share a
that's
bit about
that's
yourself?
great. It's like I'm kind of hard to contain. I'm sorry. Um, I would say that perhaps a really useful message there is that design, which I did almost really exclusively for 7 years, and I was pretty accomplished in a lot of different areas before then. So I kind of didn't mind letting them go for a minute because I had done a whole lot at a very young age and beginning at a very young age. Um, and I really did let it all go for 7 years. I did that because I really didn't have anything to prove. And and I say this ironically and with humor, but it was kind of fun being a god in another god's realm and just kind of kicking back behind the scenes. Do you know what I mean? And I spent a lot of that time on Ibiza. And I had lived in Spain before when I was very young, which was very formative for like 3, 4 years. So going back there was like going home. It was very integrating for me. So I really did do nothing but design for 7 years, which was useful to me just because I was, well, not just because, but a real perk of it was that I had already had so much knowledge in so many different traditions, because among other things, I have an undergraduate degree in religion, which at Columbia University, Barnard College. And for some reason, I decided this is another story. We don't necessarily get into that, but I suddenly realized how influential, your basic oral tradition texts are, like the New Testament. And I was already a writer, and I wasn't raised with Christianity. And I ended up in a classroom. See, now I'm telling you the story anyway, with Elaine Pagels, who is a very well known scholar in the Gnostic tradition. And because Columbia is such a diverse place, and there were 200 people in the room, I just sat there open mouthed while 200 people from all different traditions and ethnicities and everything argued about a book some guy wrote 2000 years ago. And I'm like, wow, I really feel like I want to know more about this and the structure of the way it was written, the parables, because I was a poet. And I ended up changing my major from English to religion as a result of that. And I went to college at a very, very young age. I went when I was 16. So by the time I was 18 years old, I was wandering around these obscure annexes of the New York Public Library in strange places, finding these dust covered books because they were the Apocrypha of the New Testament. The big, heavy things, right? This was before digital, big, heavy things that had to get rolled out on carts. And I'm like 5'1.5", right? And I was 18, and I was, kind of styling in my dress, but there I was. And I would literally be brushing the dust off of them and opening them up to page whatever to read this apocrypha or that apocrypha, because it linked in with Gnosticism in a certain way. And from there it went on. I edited inspirational self-help books. I'm also an author, blah, blah, blah. But we're not talking about that right now. And I ghosted and doctored them at a very high level. And in my own life, I was exposed to many traditions. So by the time, and did well and enjoyed it. So by the time that I got to design, I was ready to put a lot of that into a cabinet and organize it and really focus on my own work. And what the body graph did specifically was it gave me a way to organize everything just by the definitions and the circuits and all those things, right? The basics. And also because there are a few things about my design that resonate with Ra's design, the knowledge just kind of sunk in very quickly. And later on, I said to a friend, should I even have done that? Somebody in design, and that who was also in design, a friend from here. And that friend who is no longer with us said, well, I don't see how you wouldn't have, because it suited you so well and it was such a good match. How would you not have done that? So that's how I got there. And that's why I did it for 7 years, because I was ready to put all of that away. And I had some very unusual things happen to me in the few years preceding design, like all the best and kind of all the worst, not all the worst, but some of it at the same time. So it was good. So anyway, the point being is I really only did design for 7 years. But at this point, I always wanted to return to my other things, right? Because I'm not really gonna, how can I put this? I'm not going to work through somebody else's work for my whole life because I have my own. So, and I always knew that for me, that would not be the best use of what I've been given and have to offer. So, and also that was extremely difficult work that I did. And I did it basically pro bono. People should know that. And I gave my royalties, such as they were, which were, back. I refused to accept them. So I'm not receiving any payment from any of those books. And I actually asked for my name to be removed, but Ra didn't do it because it wasn't my work. And because there was just some distortion about all of that. It's really his work. And I'm okay with that. So, and also because things changed after his transition, as things do. So I was always looking forward to using design as a basis and in some ways a container and an internal structure for other mediums. And my path is generally pretty wide. And design really showed me that I could be what is these days called a polymath, and it would be fine.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it because that's also what you're bringing to the festival. But before I will direct our conversation into really what you are bringing, I have personal, transpersonal question. Yeah, because obviously, if you changed your major and you were drawn to religion at school, yeah, there was something within you. You don't need to have the gates and channels of mystic path. Yeah, it's enough.
I don't have any of them.
I know. That's why I'm saying exactly that sentence. To be drawn to something bigger than you are and look for answers to questions. And then, of course, it's not a coincidence that you were one of the first people who received the cosmology. So my question is, did you get an answer? Yeah. Did you did you find your picture of reality, through combination of other knowledges and cosmology on top that satisfied you and brought you peace?
That's a great question. Let me ponder it for a second. Really, my first answer you may not like so much because these things are never ending. There is no one point of peace. Their satisfaction is not necessarily an equilibrium. It's a forward movement. So for me, it's more like, and science is like that, right? A thing that I watch these days when I look at how people are approaching and absorbing and then expressing cosmology, whether they love it or they hate it or they're scared of it or they want to use it to control in any way possible the future, because the future is so scary, right? All of those things. What I'm usually thinking is science keeps moving forward, and cosmology is not a static, definitive body of work. Like science, it has to keep moving and adjusting. For instance, the whole dark matter thing was just starting to happen in the time when Ra was first teaching it. And by the way, yeah, I guess I was one of the first, and I was the person that he wanted to continue to teach it, because there just aren't that many people who have all as many as possible skills involved to continue to synthesizing and recreating the program, which is what he wanted me to do and gave me a whole directive on it, but which unfortunately was unable to happen, at least so far, right? But so there were, it wasn't just me, there were a bunch of people around. There was the whole class at least. But that has changed, because at this point, no one has found any dark matter yet, as far as I know. I follow these things fairly closely. And it's not just dark matter, it's dark matter and dark energy. And there are a lot of equations it should exist. But at this point, some people aren't really sure that it does because they haven't found any yet. And there are other exciting things happening in science. And this is normal for science. It keeps moving. So with it, cosmology ought to keep moving, because Ra was a scientist. He understood that. He mutated human design knowledge regularly. If he was still alive, he would have evolved certain things. But human beings like things to be really certain and static, right? And so it gets a little too fossilized for me. And I'm always wondering what to say about that and how to say that, because you want people to have their gateway portal, right? You want them to feel invited and asked to come in and to explore it, and to feel empowered by having a new way of looking at the universe or the biverse or whatever you want to call it, and that there can be a way, something they can bring to it that is their own, so they don't feel overwhelmed and they have a path. That's a great thing. So you don't want to mess with it. And I understand it. But at the same time, it's a moving target. Make sense?
Absolutely.
So that's where I sit with this. And I feel very empowered, is what I want to say. That's really the result it had for me, because I was working on the ABC's teacher's manual, and that teacher training program and that course. I was synthesizing it out of something he just taught, the new way of doing it, which I just been there for with a couple other people and some other things. And that begins with an introduction to neutrinos, right? So I was sitting there with my laptop somewhere on Ibiza on the internet, such as it was in, 2005, I believe it was, yes, and researching around. And I suddenly really enjoyed the physics, which I never had before, but I have science genetics in my genetics. And I started talking to him about that. And he actually asked me to write the juxtaposition theory as a book. And it really opened a doorway into me feeling like it was fine for me to explore physics and to bring more of myself to the table, and not just be an artist, in one direction, but that I could synthesize other aspects into what I was doing, and it wouldn't be confusing ultimately to other people, and it could be part of my identity, and it could be okay, and I could keep playing with that. So that has continued till this day, is that I really brought a lot more of my technical side into everything. It was already there, but into everything that I do. So that I would say for me personally, that would be one of the bonuses of it.
And actually, that's what we discussed with you before recording some other day. Remember when the topic of
Yeah.
AI came, and we're very excited to actually discover how the whole existence of this technology shapes human consciousness and the way
Right.
we perceive both reality and ourselves and our connections. And I'm slowly taking you to the actual thing that also you are bringing to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
festival.
Anytime you want to. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm here already.
Yeah. Okay. So because that is actually the continuation of the story I just told, right? Is I understand in many ways that technology is a major force in my life and always has been, which is another story. And new technologies have been really good to me, and they've also been challenging. So when the AI thing started, I knew I needed to pay attention to it because I really owe a lot of who I am to innovations in technology in a very serious way, which is another story. So I began to look at it. And also, I'm thinking about 2027. Quite frankly, dear viewers, I know it's all the rage. 2027 was never my favorite part of cosmology when I was teaching it. I have to confess. I've been looking at cycle change as a general force and topic really since I was about 4 or 5. I have what you call in design cycle nodes. I'm kind of here to watch things change. And when I was a little tiny kid, I was really afraid the world was going to end. And it was that part of history when maybe it might have, because the Cold War, because Cuban Missile Crisis, because a lot of things. And I remember asking my dad if that was going to happen. And he was a scientist, and he explained to me how it couldn't happen. The world couldn't end in the year 2000. And, but I never really forgot about this stuff. I was having dreams at that age. So I've always been looking at those things. I've been and they sort of come to me. People have been telling me about predictions and prophecies or whatever, along with a whole lot of other stuff, right? It's just one facet of life, really my whole life. And I very thoughtfully looked at all of that. And from the time really I was a book editor, that was what was that? The Saturn Neptune conjunction, the whole 1987 thing in the 80s, where the world was supposed to like go away and explode, and we were all waiting for the earthquake. I was a very, very young book editor then in sort of that field. And I would just watch and say, is this really going to happen? Because, you know, I'm kind of agnostic about everything, even though I'm also deeply spiritual. And I watch and nothing happened, but other things happened. I won't go into here. Interesting things happened. And I've looked at all of these predictions ever since. I'm good with numbers and probabilities intuitively, which means I'm kind of good with the stock market. There are people in financial, someone pointed that out to me in college who was going into financial services, that really it's the same skill where you analyze, let's say, astrological data and synthesize it, and the data from the stock market, for instance. It's the same skill, so everybody's fine with it. And really, there are people in the financial world who really respect me because I come up with things that they wouldn't, and I'm not terrible at it. Let's just say that. So these are, secular and esoteric skills. It's the same thing. And I've been doing it forever. So you have to remind me of the original question, because that was all about
No,
AI.
we are
That's the question.
synthesizing human design and
With
technology.
AI. So anyway, when AI came up in 2027, I was like, maybe this is part of what we're talking about. So while I was researching AI, I began to, and global cycles together, I just began to put the data together and look at how would I use the global cycles material, the locks and the keys, how would I use that to analyze what's going on with AI? Could it be a part of the things that are going on? How does it fit in? And how would I analyze it from a human design perspective, which is something that I do a lot of, which is using the foundations of design to analyze what's going on in current events and other things, cycles generally, right? And it goes to some pretty interesting places. So I've been doing this fairly regularly for, I don't know, what is it, 2, 3 years? It's all happening so quickly. And really at this point, I'm taking elementary classes online in neural networks, so I really understand how that works from the inside. I'm really following people who are programming it, who are experts, who love it, who hate it, and learning about how it's constructed, programmed myself, because it's not hard, because I can, and because I feel like it's a really important part of creating offerings on this topic. There are too many people who go through the world, and I understand why this happens. I've done it myself many times, who, there's something inspirational they want to teach, or anything that they want to teach. They want to help people with self-discovery. They want to talk about the future, what's going to happen. And they will have kind of a universal idea that's been expressed through a variety of spiritual practices, and they'll tie it to one little soundbite of science, right? Like dark matter, right? Like we are all one, and the quantum. There is a whole list of things that you can do. It's a standard way of writing a self-help book and other books too. And I don't like that anymore. The factoid that people use, it's usually a pretty yummy one, whatever it is, but there's usually a whole lot behind it that's more interesting and doesn't necessarily correlate with the one little item that they use, because science keeps moving. And I'm a 6'2". I don't want to be a hypocrite. So if I'm going to teach this stuff, I'm going to learn about it from the inside. That's my point. And I wish other people did that, because just because someone can relate one little piece of science to what they're talking about doesn't validate what they're talking about. Am I
That's a
making
huge
sense to you?
point. And of course, we see it a lot also because generally the education system is changed in the last 100 years by narrowing down and specializing down. I know it with my example. I started my education in Soviet Union, and even though
Right.
I went to study cybernetics as my
Cool.
first major, I studied philosophy, I studied history, I studied sociology, and in the first 2 years in university. But then when I moved on in my education in different countries, and specific, I went to study actually art and cinematography. That's what I studied. There was nothing else related around, almost. Yeah. So, and that's what we see, especially in the technical professions. They don't get this variety of perspective, no humanities or whatsoever. So, what you're observing now, to me, is it's just specifics of the general process of humanity.
Yeah. And luckily these days, it's more okay socially, right? In the
Oh, that is
collective.
the way to survive because we cannot
Yeah.
grasp everything like before. The system gets more and more specific, so nobody can have that wide angle anymore. that's why we're getting into the pixels of reality. And
The pixels of reality. That's good. Yeah. I like that.
yeah,
And at the same time, specialization is too narrow for some people.
exactly. Exactly.
It's a real dynamic between granular and big picture, right? Because we have to adapt, and many of us are benefited by taking on other skills and changing our world picture. And it's suddenly okay to be a polymath, which means you're good at a bunch of different things. That used to be suspicious.
It used to be called ADD.
It still is to some extent, or it used to be called dilettante. And especially if you were a woman, that was a serious problem. If you were a guy, you were a Renaissance man, or you were Leonardo da Vinci. And if you were a woman, it was just suspicious. And I can tell you, because I am one, right? Huh. And that has really changed. First there was the multi-hyphenate in Hollywood, because I've been watching these things. And now polymath is a really cool thing to be. You kind of have to explain it to people because not everyone knows what that means. And it's kind of a confusing word because it has math in it, right? What are they talking about?
Well, you can
But
talk about the generator response and just say, I'm not responding to it anymore, and that's why I'm into something else.
you
There
can
there are
do that
also
too.
different ways to address it.
Yeah,
If
well, it's also experiential because my brand is kind of these days when I talk, and this is people outside of design, it's you're the voice of experience. You have to use your voice. And I have training and I am been working on podcasts for a while now. It's just what's the right moment to put it up there, which is going to be soon. And so if you're abstract with an abstract authority, you have a series of life experiences and you don't necessarily have them all at the same time, but they do add up into people recognizing, you know, it's a projected definition in my case, even though I'm not a projector, that you have such a broad range of life experience, which is in my case true. And it's something that I just kind of spontaneously have started to hear in the past couple of years in other worlds, like in the podcasting world and in the world of contemporary art globally, for instance. So that's kind of cool. And not everyone has to follow this path. I personally am designed for it. And one of my guiding lights in this process is that I know I am designed for it. So when I myself hesitate, because still it's really easier to be one thing or another in this world, as you just said. And in science, you tend to specialize, I agree. But I just remember my design and that's my template.
Mhm.
And it gives me a way to, working around. So how I started speaking, to answer your first question, it gives me somewhere to put it, right? There's a structure for it. And from there, I can keep moving forward. And when there are other people like me, and there are, they know, oh, wait, I can do that. That works.
And that's actually, from our conversations
Yeah.
before, what
Uh-huh.
I picked up, and I thought it would be incredible for people to taste
Uh-huh.
how we can take human design system, which
Uh-huh.
is in the way stable, yeah, and that's what the mind loves. Yeah, here is a
Right.
system, it's stable, yeah, it's formulated, there's a methodology that's been established through trial and error. Methodologies changed until there's something fixed and it works
Mhm.
or not. Yeah,
Mhm.
because some
Mhm.
people decide it doesn't work and then they create their own methodologies, which
Mhm.
is the most natural thing on earth to happen as well.
Mhm.
But what you are doing is you're not adding things to it, you're not changing it, but you're just using it as a language to
That's right.
describe something else and
Mhm.
to look at something else from a different perspective. That's how I understand your work.
Yes, you understand it very well.
And that's what you will bring also to the festival, yeah, which is a platform for you to show up because you have not been really out there sharing human design, as you said yourself. You finished a
Not lately.
7-year cycle and you move on to other things. And now, yeah, we're kind of rediscovering you. As Deborah just needs to be there. I mean, so many people still study with your book, but they don't know who you are and where you are at. And yeah, so this thing, AI, or art, or modern development and human design, how it can be even like, how can it inspire people to what? What is our intention here?
I just want to say that I did not even know until recently that people were still working with that book.
Mm.
I didn't even know. No one
Well, it's
told me.
actually books. It's not just one
I
book.
didn't know. I had no idea. I don't hear about that from anyone. So keep telling me that you're using that book because otherwise I don't even know about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, by the way, I that was, at that time I gave back the royalties, right? Such as they were. But things have just changed organizationally, so no one lets me know that that's even happening. Um, one thing I want to say is I don't rule out the possibility that I will develop certain things in human design further. I won't change them, but I was given license to do that by Rod. So at some point when the time is right, I will probably. Um, but I am a very strong, don't even want to say believer, more like I have experienced the importance and the strength and the power of lineage and transmission. I am a very paradoxical person in some ways, because in some ways, anyone will tell you I'm always mutating, I'm radical, my other brand is what's she doing now, right? And on the now what's she doing? Like, where is she? What's she doing? Which is funny because often I'm just sitting in my house, but I still give this impression. And on the other hand, on the other side, I'm pretty conservative, okay? Because I really believe in lineage and transmission. I have the 32nd gate 3 times. Um, Little known fact, very important one. And it's not because I'm such a staunch believer in the patriarchy or some damn thing, or even the matriarchy. It's because it works and you should respect what becomes before you, and it's to your benefit. So even when I would evolve something further, I would always refer to the original because otherwise you're not empowering people. Just yesterday, I was speaking with someone about the Ravi Ching, and I was mentioning a keynote or two, and that person said, "Oh, that's not the keynote for that line. It's blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's not blah, blah, blah." And it was an English keynote. And that person said, "Well, this teacher taught me that was the keynote, and that Ra told them that anybody could rewrite the Ravi Ching." And I'm like, okay, cool, but you can't, but if you don't have the original, then what do you have? Nothing. And then we can't talk to each other. So it's about,
And
and he did
actually,
say,
he did, sorry, but I don't think that's what he said. He said you
yes, he
can
did.
write your own I Ching
Yeah, he said you can write your own, not
and not
the.
rewrite the I Ching. So
Right. Well, yeah, but there are people who are only being taught the second, yeah, the second generation I Ching and not the original. Yes, you're exactly right. Yeah, he didn't. Yes,
semantically, totally different sentence.
that's correct. He never said to replace it. I don't think he even thought about it.
Of course.
And I'm not sure it's the best idea. So I would never do something like that. You want the transmission, right? And also I am happy to return to human design. It's just about the right time and the right place. I needed to take a break for a variety of reasons, in part because I'd been doing nothing but human design pro bono for 7 years. It was kind of exhausting, and I needed some balance. And also, after Ra transitioned, the bargain changed. So that was actually very challenging for me because lots of work that I had done for free, literally for years, was not being valued as it had been when he was alive. And agreements that we had about it were not being honored, in part, at least, because he didn't tell anybody. Manifestors, you got to inform people. Otherwise, your impact, it might not be the impact that you were intending. We all make mistakes, this is my PSA for the manifestors of the world. So I'm more than delighted to return to human design. I already anticipated and hoped to do that when the timing was right.
No,
And
you are doing it right now, this
well,
very
I've done it
moment,
before.
by
It's
the
not the
fact
first
of
time.
by the fact of us talking. And
That's true. I thought about that. That's true. So yeah, and I have intentionally not done something like this for many years. Intentionally, and also because other things were happening. So it's really interesting to kind of sit back and watch what's going on. Because just because I'm not around doesn't mean I'm not paying attention. That's another PSA. Because I'm almost always paying attention. And
I
just,
want to bring you
oh, we're
to
going back to the topic again?
yeah, because I don't think you answered completely what I want to pull
Okay,
out of you,
keep going, keep going,
to bring
keep
out
going.
of you, and that is indeed like how. mm I want to go a little deeper,
Yep.
kind of. On the one hand, I want to start wrapping up because we intended for like 20-minute talk, and it's
No, we have a good time when we get together, don't we?
yeah. And on the other hand, I really, as an investigator, I want to pull out of you this wisdom of really how to use
Oh,
human design beyond just strategy and authority, how to use it in different fields, how people who come to the festival and listen to you can not only learn about AI and human design and how to look at the development, philosophical also, not just technological development of humanity through these two mediums, but how to use the medium of human design to look at life, to look at specific
oh,
phenomena
cool.
that are evolving.
Well, that's a course in and of itself. That's the first thing I want to say. And it's actually fairly straightforward. I see people doing it online all the time. So let me give you an example. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Um, it's kind of a what not to do example. It gets right back to global cycles, and it's part of why I specifically wanted to teach global cycles because I'm concerned. Once upon a time, a long time ago, it was probably around the time that I arrived in human design, which was like, I don't know, 2002, somewhere around there. Ra was looking at Neptune in a certain gate. And by the way, if you don't care about planets or human design or I Ching or any of that stuff, just pretend we're talking about whatever kind of data you use to draw a conclusion or make a prediction or a probability in your own field, because it's pretty interchangeable. And I myself go back and forth. Ra made it, mark my words, bird flu was going to take out humanity. That was like 2002. And it was going to happen like pretty soon because Neptune was in a certain gate. And I can't remember which gate it was, but you could look it up because Neptune was slow. And then he moved on, right? Because what everyone is missing right now about Ra is he keeps moving. And he was on to the next thing because it didn't happen right then. And it's like lava. It's a mutative process. It continues. Cool. I'm down with that. And what I have seen routinely on social media is people find this one little article or audio from, it might have even been right before 2002. I'm not really sure. And they say, oh, he was right. The poor guy. Everybody said he was wrong. And now we're going to prove him right because here comes bird flu and it's going to take out humanity. And I'm like, okay, that was a transit from 20 years ago.
And I think it was 26, maybe something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in those
Transmitter, you know, we're all
somewhere in that Audi
contagious.
AUGH, somewhere in that area. And people get really fixated on, and I'm going to talk about this too in at the festival. On I think, and then it was H1N1, and now it's H5N1. I don't know, the ones, the fives. I don't know. There's a lot of them these days, of course. And they're going, and they're asking, isn't that's going to be it? That's going to be 2027. That's going to be the cycle shift in humanity. And I'm like, guys, the forest for the trees. Because first of all, you don't need the bird flu, right? Because you can watch society unraveling. Let's just take the advent of COVID because everybody knows about it. There are many other threads to pull. What happens? COVID comes, the tribe starts breaking down. Why? Nobody can go to birthday parties. People can't go to funerals. People can't go to weddings. This is the tribe. This is tribal touch. This is the 3740. And it is being systematically negated and unraveled. There isn't any touch. There isn't any forever. There isn't any circle of the tribe. There isn't any mystical bridge. It's already been happening for 5 years. If you just look at whether or not bird flu might arrive, and it looks like it might, I've been watching that too for a while, then you're missing everything else. But people really need to feel certain and narrow and have the one thing. So what I would say is don't do that. If you really have to, and it's correct for you, I support you, but you're missing so many things if you do that. I'm just being dispassionate about it. But what is interesting is what I just said. I mean, and that's interesting too. I'm just going to focus on the COVID thing because I think it's more productive for all of us. Remember what T.S. Eliot said, this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. 2027, people are looking for a big bang. It's kind of a lot of whimpers, cycle change, right? So look at what's going on and analyze it from the perspective of your knowledge of human design in really simple ways because they're powerful. That would be my first tip. Does that work for you? Okay, that's the beginning. And it's beautiful. Yeah, you like that? Okay.
And then?
Oh, and then what?
And then what?
Oh, and then what? Even more simple, you may not like this. I'm not really talking about human design in the world unless somebody asks me, because I don't need to. What I like to say, if somebody does ask, it's really all in the sauce. It just naturally kind of comes out of you at a certain point, or it does me. It integrates. So I'm never going to lecture somebody about it. I'm not going to talk about it unless it comes up. And quite frankly, there are other beautiful and wonderful things to talk about. But when I'm walking through the Biennale in Venice with a group of people from the Portland Art Museum, because our artist was chosen as the for the American Pavilion this year, which is a great honor. So there we were. I'm looking at all the art from the perspective of design in fairly simple ways that are very rich. And someone asks me about something, I'm going to respond. And I'm not going to say this is human design. I'm just going to talk about what I see. And that does happen. And it works. And I'm not even thinking now I'm going to talk about human design. I'm just being me. I mean, I am a 6'2" off the roof. It may be different for everyone, but it just kind of happens when you're in the flow. That's the other thing I want to say right now, as opposed to later. is it's just in the sauce. It's an ingredient, it's there. And there is a day that comes where you're not so much thinking about the mechanics all the time in your head. You don't need to only communicate in that language. You don't need to be technical. You can relax. It does exist. Is that helpful?
After you have lived and experienced every channel, every gate, every center, then that's when you can forget about it, because then you incorporate the knowledge. And to me, what you're sharing right now is exactly the difference between studying and living. Because if you study, you keep talking about it as a subject. But
and it's exciting. It's great to talk about it.
But if you're incorporating it,
I've done it. Yeah.
It becomes just kind of, part of life. You don't want to talk about air and water all day long because it's just air and water.
But there it is when you need to drink it or breathe it, right?
Yeah, you do the element ceremony and then you give them a special space and honor and gratitude, and you asking for forgiveness because you're polluting just by the fact of being a human being. And to me, that's how I understand what you're transmitting right now.
Well, everyone's going to refract it in their own way through their unique jewel of a crystal and experience, right? So absolutely, that's a great way to put it. And, it's also funny little things like when I'm memorizing the security code for one of my credit cards, I do it in gates and it's really easy. I don't tell anyone, but it's like, oh, really? It's those gates? Huh. And, it almost always works. I mean, surely there are numbers beyond 64.
Incredible. No, my last card that I received was...
Right. I mean, I just had to redo a couple of them because of these little fraud things that happen all the time in our world. So I have 2 new ones, and one of them is... So it's just little fun things like that. And you can kind of entertain yourself with them.
Of course.
And quite frankly, I know this will come as a shock to many people, or at least some, but I don't even always look at anybody's design or ask for their birth data before I work with them. It's correct for me, or if it's not. And I can kind of feel what's going on there. And if I need to, I ask. But at a certain point, it's not people aren't a piece of paper, and I'm certainly not going to accept or reject anyone based on a piece of paper. I would never have done that to begin with. I mean, you learn a lot from who you accept into your life or not, but I would never do that. But now I don't even ask unless there's a reason.
Yeah, it's beautiful what you share. I like to say that the map is not the territory.
Right.
So it's exactly that. Even though at some point, if you own the cafe and you want your waiter to run all day, you don't want to have a projector.
Correct. At least if you want them to run all day and not get sick and die, then you don't want a projector. No, if I had a small business, I would definitely engineer a penta if I could. And doing business consulting, which I have, and mind you, at very high levels, I've seen astonishing things happen. But I'll tell you a secret. I did not go through the whole penta process. In some cases I wanted to, but I have literally told someone, a physician, 3 things about their group that they're working with, because they'd never even had time to sit and actually have the session with me, seen their eyes go, and within like a month, they changed their whole business. It's really astonishing what this information can do. So I am tending to provide less rather than more with each session when I do them, because more is overwhelming. Sorry, guys out there with variable and subline structure.
Yeah.
Sorry, but less is more and more is less because it's so overwhelming. So that too, it's just, I would definitely do it if I had a cafe. especially if something wasn't working and if it was possible. But yeah, you would. And on the other hand, I have someone who's my trainer who I've worked with now for so many years by now, who her birthday is like a couple days before mine. So I know what cross she's on, right? It's similar to mine. She's the right angle, I'm the left angle. So in her case, it's explanation. And I'm pretty sure that she's a projector, but like a good 4323, she's deaf. So she doesn't actually want to find her birth data, which is fine with me because I know I can tell what's up, right? And I just treat her like a projector with the 4323, and everything is fantastic. I don't need to know anymore. And she doesn't want to. That's a 4323. They don't want to. Cool. I get that, So
You own the one yourself, so why wouldn't you?
yeah, I got a pretty fancy model there. So I get that. So just relax. Sorry, it's a terrible thing to say in 2025 in the world that we're in, but I just went and said it just to the extent that you can.
Yeah, I was gonna start, wrapping up our interview and say, what would be your blessing for those who will not come to the festival, for example, and will listen to you, or those who will come to the festival and listen to
Blessing.
you? Like, beyond relax.
It makes me think of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Never mind. Well, that's very flattering that you would think that I would have a blessing. Um, yeah, everyone's going to hate this probably, but especially in our world, everything gets too mental. I believe I read a statistic where every day or every year, probably every day, but I'd have to check, we are absorbing 10,000 times more information than we did 10 years ago. So the thing to do about that is follow your strategy and authority. Sorry, everyone. I know there's all that fancy, sexy stuff. I too have been to the end of the universe and back with it. I'm the poster child for that. People used to be kind of annoyed with me because I was just given that stuff. I'm good with the whole range, but I could do that stuff, so I did it. She's being so esoteric and mental, whatever. I really not true. I really feel that in this world where there is already too much information, to the extent that you can be simple, and it's not an easy task, and connect with your body. And human design is not the only discipline that ever said this. It's not special that way. It just said it its way, and people like that. That's a good thing. Remember what your body is. Go outside, walk around, get off the screen, harder and harder all the time. I myself have more trouble with that than I used to. That's the best way to deal with all of it, is to step away from it and return to yourself. That would be my blessing. Does that work for you?
Very much. It's exactly what you said a few minutes before, less is more. And reminding to ourselves the simplest things, the really simplest things, is the key to go to that simplicity on the level of the being. Because being is simple. Doing brings so much complication. And we're in the world of both. We're in the world of duality, which is kind of the personal harmony between the two, when there is one.
And the simple is not easy, right? Simple but not easy. That's a refrain in the world and certainly in human design.
Yeah.
That's why people often go to these other places, which I really understand, is because it's not easy. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it isn't.
Just like strategy and authority is not that easy at all. In fact, it's the
Exactly.
hardest thing on earth.
Right, which is why it's so tempting and seductive to go into all that mental detail. And it's great to take a vacation there, and it's great on its own merits, but not at the expense of the other stuff. So that is my only hesitation in teaching cosmology is you have to start from a really grounded place and then go back there, which is why it's been so lovely to have an extended conversation. So all of that can just marinate in the stuff of a extended conversation and our digressions and the stuff of the real world and the real time in the everyday, right?
It's incredible, Deborah. That's actually, the true blessing. Let's get grounded and then fly to the sky just to go back to the ground, healthy mentally and physically.
Right. And that's the trick. Um, but it can be done, and you don't have to do it perfect every time. Perfection is not useful. Okay, so I guess we did it, huh?
We did it. Thank you so
Oh,
much for
oh, you
showing
did.
up. And I'm really looking forward your offering with human design and AI. Let's see what shows up.
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of the things that you were asking me about, like how do you use human design just to look at the world and empower yourself and move through it, that's kind of actually my goal in that lecture is to open some of that up for people and take some of the spin and the fear and the confusion off of the AI thing. I'm actually going to use that
Beautiful.
as an example to do exactly what you just asked me about. So there you have it.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you
Woohoo.
so much, Deborah.
Thank you. Great questions as always.
Yeah. Ciao, everyone. See you at the festival. Bye
You
bye.
soon. Bye-bye.
Human Design Rave Festival 2025. Get your ticket now.